Hi guys. Today we're going to be talking about using conversion factors. If you remember from the first video, we defined what a conversion factor was. It's really just kind of a fancy way of writing the number 1. But it's a fraction with the same quantity in the numerator and the denominator, but just written using different units. And so as a result, a conversion factor can be used to convert from one quantity into another. And we use these conversion factors all the time in daily life, oftentimes without even realizing it. For example, we'll say things like, well, 1 hour is the same thing as 60 minutes, or there's 365 days in a year. Well, all those things are conversion factors. But the conversion factor allows us to figure out what we need to multiply by and what we need to divide by when we're doing a calculation. For example, suppose we've got a quantity that's measured in years, but we need to know what it is in months. Like, suppose you need to know, what is 6,722 years if it were measured in months? Well, to solve that, we can use conversion factors. To start with, we always take what we know, and in this case, the quantity we know is 6,722 years, and we write it as a fraction. So we put the 6,722 years in the numerator, put it over 1, put the whole thing in parentheses. Then we're going to multiply that by a conversion factor to cancel out years and put it into months. So our conversion factor also has to have a top and a bottom, a numerator and a denominator. Now, we need to know how months and years are related to each other. That's where our conversion factor comes in. Well, we know that 1 year and 12 months are the same amount of time. So if we write 1 year over 12 months, same amount of time over the same amount of time, that's really just kind of one way of writing the number 1. But we could also write this 12 months over 1 year, because again, they're the same amount of time. But one of them will work better as a conversion factor than the other. For example, if we take this top one first and put that in as our conversion factor, this would show us that if we want to do the math, we multiply by all the numerators and divide by all the denominators. So we get our calculator out, we multiply 6,722 years times 1 year divided by 1 divided by 12 months, and we would find that that is 560 years squared per month. Now, where the unit years squared per month comes from, notice that in the numerators, we've got 6,722 years times 1 year. That's years squared. And then we're dividing by 12 months. That's where the month comes from. And so we get this answer. But when we look at it, we say, well, years squared per month is not even a unit that makes sense. That's nonsense. So we know that's not the conversion factor that we want to use. So let's use the other version of it. Let's put it in as 12 months over 1 year. This time you'll notice something interesting. The unit years is in the numerator in the first set of parentheses, but it's in the denominator in the second set of parentheses, so years cancels out. In this case, now when we multiply 6,722 times 12 months, years is all gone, and the only unit that's left is in months. And so this shows us that the answer is 80,644 months. So the conversion factor is set up so that the units cancel out, and the only unit that's left uncanceled is the one that we want. This can be used in metric units a lot. In the metric system, we do a lot of conversions, and they use prefixes to indicate sizes. For example, we know that micro, as in a microliter, is 1/1,000,000th of a liter. A millimeter is 1/1000th of a meter. Centimeter is 1/100th of a meter. So other prefixes mean big things, like a kilo means 1,000. A kilogram is 1,000 grams. Mega means 1,000,000. Giga means 1,000,000,000. But the problem is students oftentimes will remember those conversion factors, but then they'll get confused on, well, am I supposed to multiply by 1,000 or am I supposed to divide by 1,000? Do I multiply by 100? Do I divide by 100? Well, using conversion factors will help solve that for you so that you don't have to stop and memorize it all the time. So for example, let's make a conversion. We're going to use the conversion factor that 1 meter is 100 centimeters. And suppose we've got a quantity like this, 1.30 centimeters, and we need to know what that measurement is in meters. Well, we just use the same method that we did before. Start with what you know, put it over 1, put it in parentheses. So we've got 1.30 centimeters over 1. Then we need to set up a conversion factor. Now, our conversion factor again could be written as 1 meter over 100 centimeters, or it could be written as 100 centimeters over 1 meter. Well, the one that we pick This is where the units come in. We let the units guide us. Since the 1.30 centimeters in our original number has centimeters on the top, we want to cancel that unit out. So the fraction we're going to pick needs to have centimeters on the bottom. So the conversion factor that we're going to use is the 1 meter over 100 centimeters. In this case, now the unit centimeters will cancel out. And again, if we just multiply by everything on the top, divide by everything on the bottom, it shows us that if we take 1.30 and divide by 100, that will give us an answer of 0.0130 meters. Notice the ones don't really matter. If you multiply by 1 or divide by 1, that doesn't change anything. So it's the 1.30 and the 100 that we worry about. And so we just divide by 100, and that does the conversion for us. What if you've got a problem that requires multiple conversions? For example, what if we had to solve something like this? Who was the president 1 billion seconds ago? Well, the number 1 billion is a very large number, and human brains don't deal with very large numbers very well. So we need to convert this into something that we can think of more easily. And to do it, we do the same thing that we always do. We start with what we know. In this case, we know 1 billion seconds. Now, 1 billion is kind of long to write out, so I went ahead and wrote it in scientific notation. 1 billion is the same thing as 1 times 10 to the 9th. So I put 1 times 10 to the 9th seconds over 1. And I want to convert that into something else. So I think, well, what conversion factors do I know? Well, I know that seconds needs to cancel out, and so I know that there are 60 seconds in a minute. So let's use that as our conversion factor. We'll put in 1 minute over 60 seconds. And in this case, the unit seconds will cancel out. And if we run this through right now, 1 billion divided by 60, that would tell us that that's the same thing as 16,666,666 minutes. But that's also a very large number and difficult for me to visualize, so I'm going to convert this again. I'm going to cancel out the minutes and go to hours. For example, put in another conversion factor. I want to cancel out the unit minutes because it's on the top, and so I say, well, minutes is related to what? Other time unit. Well, 60 minutes is the same thing as an hour. Let's use that for a conversion factor. So now the unit minutes will cancel out, and if I take the 1 billion, divide by 60 again, that would tell me that that amount of time is the same thing as 277,777 hours. Again, still a very large number, hard for me to visualize. Let's do another conversion. Let's cancel out hours and turn that into something else. Well, one that I remember and know easily is that 24 hours is the same thing as a day. Let's use that conversion factor. Since hours is on the top, we want to cancel it out, so we need the unit hours on the bottom. So we write it as 1 day over 24 hours. The unit hours cancels. Take a billion, divide by 60, divide by 60, divide by 24, and we find out that that billion seconds is the same thing as 11,574 days. Getting closer to being understandable, but still pretty big number, and I'm not sure who was president 11,000 days ago. Let's go one more step. Let's convert one more time. Let's convert days into years. Since the unit days is on top, we need a conversion factor that has days on the bottom, and I know that there are 365 days in 1 year. So let's use that as our next conversion factor. Again, the unit days now cancels out, and if we take a billion divided by 60, divided by 60, divided by 24, divided by 365, the only unit left uncancelled is years, and that tells us that that billion seconds is the same thing as 31.7 years. Well, 31.7 is a number that I can visualize. 31.7, about 32 years ago, we're talking about 1986. And in 1986, Ronald Reagan was the president. So, when we can do a conversion, we can do a conversion that has multiple steps in it. In our next video, we'll talk about how we can use equations to figure out conversion factors and solve problems using equations as conversion factors. We'll see you then.